Okay, so we are now to solve radical equations. Equations that some type. Most of these we're going to look at will be square root problems. So we're going to have 4 steps, really more than 4, because we may have to repeat steps. So first, we're going to radical by itself on one side, then we'll raise to eliminates the radical. We'll see what I mean by that in a minute. If the radical is not gone, we step 2, but normally. And then lastly, we have to check the solution. We will see that we get what we call extraneous solutions with square roots and fourth roots and so forth. And we have to check and make sure that we haven't left a solution there that really doesn't work. All right, so let's take a look at this first one. Get the radical by itself. Well, let's radical this whole square root. It's by itself on the left. Everything that is with it is underneath it. So we can't separate the stuff that's underneath it. Step 1 is already done. To get rid of a square root, we're going to square it. So we're going to take the square root of, and actually I'll just do it right here. We're going to take this and we are going to square it. Well, that's not what I intended. Let me gosh. Okay, there we go. And we'll square it. All right, and then though, what we've done to one side, we got to remember to do it to the other side. Very, very important. If we don't forget the other side, we are not going to get the right solution. All right, so now let's go ahead and we are going to multiply this out. Now, when we square the square root, we can just think of the stuff underneath is just popping out. It's just going to, the square and the square root are going to cancel. We're just going to get x plus 3. On the right side, though, we have got to multiply out 3x minus 1 squared. And remember that this is what 3x minus 1 squared means. It means 3x minus 1 times 3x minus 1. So let's FOIL that out. 3x times 3x, well, I don't need parentheses now, is going to be 9x squared. 3x times minus 1 is going to be minus 3x. Minus 1 times 3x is going to be minus 3x. And minus 1 times minus 1 is plus 1. Now, notice I've got a quadratic. I have an x squared. So I'm going to move everything over to one side, get it all in descending order, and see if we can factor this thing. Now, the x and the 3 will be easier to move than all of this right-hand side, so I'm going to move the x and the 3 over to the right rather than moving to the left as we've done with some others. So I'll leave everything on the right alone for the moment. Add like terms in a minute. But when I move the x, it'll be a negative x, and when I move the 3, it'll be a negative 3. So now I'll combine like terms over here. All right, so I've got 9x squared, but my negative 3, and negative 1x will all add to negative 7x. And my 1 and my negative 3 will add to negative 2. And I do believe this factors, so let's take a look and see if we can figure this out here. All right, where's just weird. All right, so 9x squared. Now, normally I would probably choose 3x and 3x, but I can actually see the solution here as I'm looking at it. So I'm going to choose 9x and 1x as my, I don't know why word is malfunctioning right now. Okay, all right, 2. I'm going to choose negative 2 and 1. And then we'll double check and make sure that I'm right here. I might have my signs backwards. All right, so let's notice if we check, and I'll use my little draw thing here. The middle is negative 2x. And 9x times 1 is positive 9x. That gives me a positive 7 when I add those together, and I need a negative 7. So I do, in fact, have my signs backwards. So let's just switch those, and we will be okay, and then we'll be able to set these to 0. Oops. Of course, by changing those signs, I have a plus and a minus. All right, now let me get out of the draw feature, and let's set 9x plus 2 to 0. And I just can't type very well in here. And let's set x1 to 0. All right, so subtracting 2 on both sides here. Gives me 9x equals negative 2. And dividing by 9, we get x equals negative 2/9. 2/9. There we go. All right, and then x minus 1, I just need to finish by taking the 1 to the other side, and we get that the x is 1 is also a solution. Now, here's where it's very important that we check. We do not want a negative underneath that square root. And we also will find out, we get these things called extraneous solutions that don't work in the original. Now let's remember, my original did not have these squares here. I am going to begin by checking the positive 1 just because it will be easier in the original. So I'll have the square root of 1 plus 3. And I'm just going to do this just because it's easier than going and getting that square root symbol. So remember that square that was on the outside was not there earlier. And then 3 times 1 minus 1. And the square, again, wasn't there when I had the problem originally. So the square root of 4 is what I have, which is 2. And, oops. And then on the right side, 3 minus 1 is 2. This is okay, all right? So x equals 1 is a perfectly okay solution. But let's check 2/9, negative 2/9. All right, so let's do square root of negative 2/9 plus 3 and 3 times negative 2/9 minus 1. Okay, now if you don't like fractions, that is fine. Use your calculator. So if you want to, and I'll go ahead and use my calculator now, I'll put the square root of negative 2/9 plus 3 in my calculator. Be sure to put that entire thing in parentheses as you stick it in there. So that gives me, in my calculator, gives me a decimal that goes on forever, 16.666666, but I'll just round it to 2 decimal places. As long as I do the same thing to the right side, that's fine. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in the calculator. I kind of guess that I'm not going to get positive 16.67, but we'll check. I, in fact, get negative 16.67, and those two are not equal, which means that the negative 2/9 is an extraneous solution, and we want to cross it out and not list it as a solution. All right, so let's look at a second one. And the second one is very similar to the first one, except we want to do our first step. And I want you to notice our first step up here was to get the radical by itself. And it's very important. If you don't get the radical by itself, you're going to make some big mistakes. So notice this minus 2 that's not under the radical. It's not part of the radical. We need to move this minus 2 over to the right side first. All right, so I'm going to do that. All right, when I move the 2 over, it'll become a positive 2, so I'll add it to the 1, and it gives me x plus 3. Now it's just like the last problem. Our next step is to raise it to the power that eliminates the radical. So square root will be eliminated by a square, so I'm going to raise both sides to the second power. And so raise that to the second power, and then don't forget to raise this side over here to the second power. All right, so on the left, the square root and the square cancel one another out. We get x plus 23. On the right, let's remember that x plus 3 squared really means this. So let's go ahead and FOIL out that right side. X times x will give us x squared. X times 3 will be 3x. 3 times x will be 3x. And 3 times 3 will be 9. And just as I did with the last one, I'm going to move everything over to the right side and try to factor. So I will move the x and the 23 over, leave everything on the right side alone for the moment. So all of this will remain the same, but when I move the x, it'll be a negative x, and when I move the 23, it will be a negative 23. So let's see what we've got left when we add like terms. All right, so we've got a 3x, and a negative x. That's a 5x. And I have a 9 and negative 23, which should be negative 14. And that does factor. Let's notice x and x. And factors of negative 14 that add to 5 will be positive 7 and negative 2. All right, and let's set both of those to 0. And this one gives us negative 7, and the second one gives us positive 2. Now, one of those is more than likely an extraneous solution. I'm guessing it's going to be the negative one, but let's check it out. Square root of negative 7 plus 23, go all the way back to the original, minus 2, equals negative 7 plus 1. All right, so what we really have is the square root of negative 7 and 23 will be 16, minus 2 equals negative 6. And the square root of 16 is 4. So we have 4 minus 2 is 2. Yeah, those are definitely not right. So let's go back to my draw here. And I know that this one doesn't work. Now we got to check both of them because sometimes both of them won't work. It's not likely, but we'll check it. All right, so now let's put the 2 in. So we'll have square root of 2 plus 23 minus 2 equals 2 plus 1. Well, square root of 25 minus 2 equals 3. And square root of 25 is 5. 5 minus 2 is 3. And so this one actually checks for us. Now I have one more that has 2 radicals, but I'm going to save it for another video because I see that my time is running close to 15 minutes. And the video only allows 15 minutes, so this program does anyway.